Welcome to Rock That Relationship, a podcast about all things relationship with Corey and Tracy.
Now let's get real and start creating relationships that rock.
Hello and welcome to Rock That Relationship. Tracy and I are here today to talk about different expectations in relationships. What do you do when you and your partner have different thoughts about how things should be in a relationship? So we're going to get to talk about all different kinds of experiences we've had, ponder some questions, think about some ways that we might, make some suggestions about how to go about having conversations around this topic. But really the idea is, no two people come into a relationship with exactly the same expectations. So where's that sticking point and what do you do and how do you move forward? So Tracy, this is an interesting topic because we've talked about this on so many Tumamok walks and so many phone calls and so many different times. Even before recording, we've been talking about this. This is such an important episode to be having. And so we figured, that we have kind of enough experience and we have a lot of thoughts around this. And this is a really great topic for us to be bringing into this season. So, all right. Let's talk about relationship expectations. So let me just start. Yeah, I know, right? Let me just start by asking you, have you ever been in any kind of a relationship where the expectations of what a relationship should look like were just different between you and your partner? Like you both were like, yes, we're in maybe a committed monogamous relationship, as I know that you like, but your idea about what that should be just was not the same as your partner's.
I'm going to just turn this around on you because you're always asking me these questions. Why don't we ask you? Of course I've been in this. I've been in every kind of like jacked up situation there is when it comes to relationships. And again, I'm going to use my standards, communication and therapy. Like if you aren't on the same page, it's not going to work. I've been in a situationship in the last couple of years. I've been in a completely, two different relationships now where people were just overwhelmed by their own life and really couldn't be in that situation in a good way. And I think my whole entire marriage was of different expectations for what a relationship should be. So yeah, I've been in this situation a lot and I haven't done a very good job at figuring it out.
Right.
While in the relationship, a lot of looking back at it, but I don't know. I don't know if I'm ever going to be one of those people who gets with someone and sits down and says, these are all the things I want. Is this what you want? Well, let's go forward, Yeah,
but I mean, you've talked about that book, 8 Dates before. That's kind of like doing that.
Yeah, but
right?
I'm into that, not the people I seem to date, right? Or marry, right?
Okay. So maybe you would want to have those conversations, but that isn't something that's coming up in your relationships per se.
Right. Or if it does come up, it's not, I mean, it really depends on if the that's a level of commitment right there, right? That some people aren't even interested in, but also I was that person who wouldn't have done that before, I just was more like, whatever happens, more like willy-nilly about it.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And what's so interesting is I was listening to this podcast episode on To Be Magnetic this morning, and I was thinking about this all day actually. And one of the guests that they interviewed, he was talking about how relationships are best thought of instead of committing to each other, you commit to the process of having a healthy relationship. And if you both commit to the process, then you don't feel like in some ways you're trapped if you don't align at some point, right? If you're both committed to creating a healthy relationship and you just can't seem to get there, then you've given yourself permission to move on or to do something else. But if you're committed to each other, then you feel like you're tied with a rope sometimes. And that if you're not on the same boat or on the same path, you're going to end up getting dragged behind. And it was a really interesting metaphor, but I like that idea because it's exactly like what you're talking about is how much are you committed to the process of establishing these expectations and ground rules, or at least understanding that they might be different between the two of you.
Isn't it interesting that I came up with that, said that just on the same day that you listened to that podcast, right?
Exactly.
I mean, these are all very universal themes, and it really depends on, I guess, who's saying it, whether somebody can hear it, you know,
Right. Exactly.
or understand it. And I understand that now, like at a visceral level, that it's really about like, I think a lot of people could be together in relationships, right? But are they both committed to doing the work that it takes to be in that? And if you say, okay, well, I know I'm a person who wants to be in a relationship, and so I'm going to commit to that uh, process of being in a
Mm-hmm.
relationship, or that all the work that goes into it. But see, there again, like we've had these discussions where, oh, it shouldn't be this much work, or it shouldn't be that, at the beginning. I don't think that matters. I think it's like, are there two adults? And is it going to be very few things that are super easy,
Mm-hmm.
especially as we keep talking about as you get older, there's just a lot of like damage that's been done to people. So by the time they're, in their late 40s and above, it's much more difficult,
Mm-hmm.
you
Yeah.
know?
Well, absolutely. And this idea of this process and being committed to the process, like the process is, in my mind, is, we have a pretty good idea sometimes of what our expectations are in a relationship, although sometimes we're tested, right? Like this idea
Mm-hmm.
that we don't know what those expectations are until the line has been crossed. And we're like, oh, wait a minute, hold on a second. But we know our expectations. And then sometimes, hopefully, we know what our partner's expectations are, but that takes communication. But then what are our expectations of each other in this process? At what points do we compromise, right? I'm not a huge fan of compromising because you split the difference and neither party is really happy. But could your expectations change? Could one of you just be like, okay, I guess I'm just okay with that? Or could it be that you come up with another solution so that neither of you keep those expectations that you originally had and you go to like a third solution, something that like, wow, okay, this makes sense for us, right? Maybe individually it didn't, and we're not arguing for our side, but really kind of this idea of this third solution. So, that these are just some
You're
of the
very
things.
good at coming up with those things though, I think because of your line of work, right? To sit down and say that, right? Whereas like, why should it be a battle? I mean, and you're very good at like reframing that. Okay, well, we shouldn't be battling over this, so therefore that we have to compromise. I mean, now, I am working as a family law attorney, and when you are you're already in the period of separation and divorce, you have to come to a compromise because you're not going to get what you want. And either a judge is going to make that decision for you. You continue to fight, and then somebody else is the arbiter of what, is going to happen, or you sit down and compromise. But it is interesting to think in the terms of why you're in a relationship. Why are you battling in that way?
Right. And I think of like, I have an example of a relationship partner where we were having what I called the thermostat wars, right? We had different expectations of what the temperature was going to be in the house. And it ended up being that we could compromise and just be right down the middle, right? Where it was like one person was too hot and one person was too cold. But the reality is that wasn't totally going to hit it. So the third solution ended up being that we did sort of split the difference on a day-to-day basis, but I was ending up getting really, really hot. And so, and it was most pronounced when I was doing things like, teaching or presenting. And so it was like, and I'm online and I'm at home, and it's like, okay, so during those times I can turn the air conditioning on so that it's a little cooler, but then other times I don't. And so it was like, well, that's an interesting solution, right? It doesn't have to be all or nothing. It doesn't have to be the thermostat is set on something exactly, but you can talk about, okay, our expectations instead of fighting like that battle you're talking about, like I want it this temperature, I want it this temperature. Well, how about we talk about why we might need it a certain temperature at a certain time and really talk about it because, at the time, my partner had, was compassionate towards the fact that, oh no, if you're really that hot while you're presenting, that could be really distracting. I wouldn't want you to be like that. So it elicited a sense of compassion. And that was really good in some ways for the relationship because then you're not just compromising and being upset, but you're really understanding the other person.
Right? Clearly, neither of you people are suffering hot flashes, right?
Well, I
I
think
mean, that
maybe
adds
I
a
am. I
whole
don't know.
nother level, right? And we were going to talk about that in a podcast about like one person being in menopause or perimenopause. And that's something that people don't really discuss, which they should, especially, involving women. I mean, there's so many variables we can't control, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think that it, I don't know if is that different? I mean, those are just managing expectations within the relationship. Um,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
but I think like if we're talking overall, like the expectation of a relationship, I mean, like when I think of a relationship, I think of two people cooperating together towards a common goal. And then I think of that and then I don't do that when I'm in it. Like, you know, I
Mm-hmm.
haven't. I am more mature now. I'm doing that more now than I ever did. You know, it's like
Yeah.
I had this idealized version of, oh yeah, I want to be with someone and I want to be with them forever and we're going to grow old. And then I get in the relationship. I'm like, I want to live my life my way, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, that's the bigger question, right? Like all the little things, like I'm talking about the thermostat or what time you all set your alarm or all those things are all related to that bigger goal. What is your goal? Is your goal companionship? Is your goal comfort? Is your goal independent, co-living independence? Is your goal, what is that goal? Intimacy. And then if your behaviors on those little things where those expectations lie don't align with whatever that relationship goal is, then you're off, right? Like if you want to
Mm-hmm.
be in a compassionate, loving relationship, as soon as I said the thing about the thermostat, it was like, oh, I didn't realize that it was impacting you like that. And I have a sense of compassion and love for you. And therefore, this is a different conversation than we were just having because that's the goal of our relationship. But if our goal of relationship was independence, do what I want to do, and I'm hot and you're cold, that could have been a very different outcome. And so, I think the two can come together, right? This idea that what is that larger goal? What are the values that you share in terms of not the values like we both like to recycle and we both, are a certain political party, but what are the values that you really believe are the foundation for that relationship? Is it compassion? Is it companion?
Those
What
are
is it?
important values though.
They are. But you may have different ideas as to what's most important. Is it trust and honesty? And you can say all of them are important and they are, but are there some that would trump others? Meaning that when you got into a situation where, maybe they were pitted against each other a little bit, what would you assume the other person would say, right? So you want to be on the same page of that before you even think about the little expectations that you have of each other.
Yes. I mean,
Yeah. So, think,
yeah.
okay,
I mean,
think back.
there's really nothing else to say, right? Like you just said it all. I mean, it's true, but you really have to talk. Both people have to be willing to talk about that, you know?
Yeah. So think back. Okay. Think back on some of your relationships that you've had. If you were to think about what the main goal of that relationship, now it's easier to do now in hindsight, but what was the goal of that relationship when you were in it? Was it to find your forever person? Like I had one who's by the end of it, the goal was to parent well together, right? That was the goal. And that was our relationship. And other
My
people,
goal with every relationship is to be with my forever person. Yeah.
okay. What about your
Hmm.
sub goals? Was it companionship? Was it fun? Was it bringing each other to your highest potential? Was it independence?
No, I've
Was it
never really gotten past just the being the
just the
person I'm supposed to
forever?
be with. Yeah,
That's
that's
a
it.
big
Like,
one.
because I can accomplish everything else myself, right? Like, I don't need another person for any of that stuff.
No,
Like, what is the purpose of a relationship? You know, what
right.
is the purpose? I mean,
Well,
that's
that's
the
the
thing. When
question.
you
What's your
come
goal, your
together, you need
purpose?
to, right, you need to like ask yourselves, what is our purpose here? And you both have to have the same, but it's very interesting the way you talk about relationships because I would never think of relationships in those terms. The only thing I think of a relationship in terms of is this my forever person or not? You know,
Right.
am I looking for my forever person? You know, I
You
mean,
know,
really, I think this is fascinating because this is like I mean, it's weird because I am an attorney, right? So a lawyer, this right brain kind of thing, but that's not really my like the right brain part isn't my strong suit as a lawyer. It's more the emotional piece. And I'm like overall a much more emotional and like creative type, right?
yeah,
And I would never think of a relationship in terms of anything other than like, is this my person? That's it.
that's
Like,
it. Huh.
and then the rest has to be worked out, like, figured out how we're going to go forward And honestly, at this age, I just don't even know if anything matters other than if it's your person or not, because we're fully independent adults, you know? I don't need somebody else to do anything for me.
But see, that's your perspective. See, other people are in relationships because they want that reliance, that interdependence in ways that are different. And that's a goal that
The
they have.
person could die tomorrow.
It doesn't
You know what I
matter,
mean?
but people want different things out of relationships.
Do
You know,
they? Well,
my mother, when she had a relationship for a very long time with somebody after my father, and she said her main goal in that relationship, the two of them, was for companionship. They wanted to be best friends and they wanted to travel the world, and that's what they wanted to do. And the intimacy may or may not be there. All the other stuff may or may not be there. But they said the main goal that they had was that they wanted to like experience the later part of their lives through adventure and traveling the world together. So they weren't doing it alone.
Did they discuss that?
Yeah, I mean, I think so, because they were very transparent about it, both of them.
Mm-hmm. And neither one got their feelings hurt about that.
No, they didn't. And they knew that that was the main thing. But it kept them on track because they also ended up having expectations together that like they needed to travel frequently. So if they hadn't traveled in a while, they were like, well, this is one of the main things that pulls us together in our relationship. And we've been sitting on the couch for a year. We got to go travel. So like for them, it also helped them recalibrate their relationship because they got to go back to that goal and as a guiding beacon for them. And so, I think
they're very interesting that they would talk about that. And then, this is actually something that comes up in court cases, which, in this country, very contested issues about marriage. What does it mean to be married, or what does it mean to be in a partnership? Does it have to be sexual in nature? Does it have to be? Right. I just listened to a podcast this morning on, I forget what the podcast is called, but it's like, I can't believe this happened or something, but this was all about a person growing up in a polyamory family and then trying to explain that to the world and trying to figure out her own identity as she moved forward into adulthood. And, she said, we have like only specific models for things, like things have to be this way. And for me, it's just a feeling. Like the only reason I want relationships for is emotional connection.
Okay, so there's a goal there too, right? Emotional connection. Some people don't want that. They don't care about that as much. They just want to have someone to financially support them or to commingle finances. Some people just want someone to go to family reunions with. I mean, honestly, and there's nothing wrong with any of those. But if you're not on the same page,
articulate that,
right? You're clear about it. And for me, I haven't really thought about that. And until fairly, recently, I had with one of my partners, I actually created a book, like a journal, and I put prompts in the journal on each page. And I said, our relationship vision is : and I left the page blank. Our top 5 values in our relationship are, and then I made like 20 or 30 pages of these kinds of prompts, and we sat down and we filled it out together. And it was a really profound experience because we're like, are we on the same page? And we found that in many ways we were on the same page with the bigger stuff. And then that really helps set the tone for the smaller stuff. Like we go back to.
What do you think would have happened had you not been on the same page in the bigger stuff?
I don't know. I mean, we probably would have had to either accept the fact that it was different or find some common ground or negotiate into a third solution, or part ways, right? Like if it's so different. I mean, you see this happening where someone's like, my definition of a relationship or my definition of marriage is having a family, and other people's like, my definition of marriage and a relationship doesn't involve a family and involves the two of us traveling the world until we're retired. And it's like, oh no, we're 2 years in. What do we do with that? Like if we didn't talk about our definitions and now we have these totally different expectations.
Well, there was something I was going to say about that. Oh, were you far into that relationship when you did it?
Yeah, we were probably.
Or was it relatively?
No, we were far enough in that anything further than about 6 months in, you should be doing something like that. But I had thought about it because I thought it was a really cute idea, but then I didn't realize that it was going to lead to a very important discussion. And I was like, oh, I wish I would have done this before.
Sooner.
Yeah, because it was really valuable to talk about that. And, so.
But I wonder if you had done it too early, if anyone would know that. I mean, dating apps, they do ask you, when you get on the app, what are you looking for, right? Long-term relationship, just friends, I don't know,
Yeah.
whatever. So I think those are very important for people to actually think about and fill out honestly, what they want.
Right. But I mean, you were even said it, you don't even fill out those profiles. And half the ones I read were like, I'm looking for someone who doesn't cheat. So it's like clear that they'd been cheated on. But I do agree with you. Like thinking about that is really important and having those
But wouldn't it be
discussions.
better if people really honestly, and that is
Yeah.
something, they don't want somebody to be with someone who's cheating, right? They
I
don't
mean,
want to
it's
be with someone who's
right.
okay cheating. I
It's
mean,
a
I think it's good
trigger.
to do all those. I do feel those, I do answer some of those questions when I'm on one of the apps, but I just don't write a bio. I find that
Oh, okay.
weird. It's interesting because I did talk to a client today and he knew an awful lot about me. And I was like, oh my gosh, that information's out there,
Oh,
on the
yeah.
web. I didn't even realize that, right? He knew quite a bit about me. And then I was like, is that already up on the website? I hadn't looked, but then I thought, well, that is, those are the things that, like, if I'm advertising as an attorney, or if I'm advertising as a potential dater, right?
Right.
I should already pre-think about those things. How is what I'm putting out there, my image, or what I want,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because most people don't know. I mean, this is where you get into trouble. I mean, this is the difference, right? If two people get together and they just want something so radically different.
Exactly.
And
I
if
mean,
you're in
yeah.
love with each other, can you have radically different visions for a relationship and stay in it?
I mean, maybe. I guess it probably depends on what it is, having children or not having children. Maybe not.
What if you really love someone and you want to have children and they don't? Like, are there some people who would leave a relationship because the children issue is more important to them, or would they be with the person?
I mean, I've heard many cases where people leave because,
Hmm.
that's what they want, or I've heard it where people like where they live, right? Like, um, it was interesting. There was this show called The Golden Bachelor, and the people that ended up together, they were supposedly, or at least on TV, looked madly in love,
Right, love, right.
and it was
And they're
wonderful.
older.
And
That's
they're
why it's called
older,
the
and
golden.
and they like wanted to basically, find companionship and love and excitement and energy in the last parts of their life. And it ended up being that they split up not too
Hmm.
long after the show because they both were living close to their children and grandchildren, and it was just a deal breaker. It was like, this is an
Right,
expectation that I live close to my family. Well, it's an expectation for me too. And you ask one to compromise and move, they could resent you, right?
right,
Or even if they don't resent you, you're sitting there thinking, when are they going to resent me? And that just creates a wedge and a sense of guilt. And it's like, some of those things are deal breakers. Like, I want to live in Tucson. Someone who's like wants to,
right,
live in, Michigan or Minnesota or something, be like, oh no, I'm not doing it.
right,
So,
right.
but I wonder if some people, and I know some people don't talk about these things early on, or they do and they just don't think it matters, or that it won't be an issue later on, and then it comes up, right? Because you're like, okay, I don't want to do
Well,
long distance anymore, so like
right.
one of us has to move, and then nobody moves.
Well, I had a discussion with a friend recently that was similar to the kind of Golden Bachelor thing where, her daughter's away from here, away from where she lives. And then she's dating someone who has children with children. So it's children and grandchildren. And when he goes and does like a weekend trip or whatever, he wants them all to be there. And she was taken aback by that. And I said, then you have to decide. You need to be really upfront and say, this isn't the kind of the trip I want, and this isn't the kind of life I want. But, you know, that's on him to decide if he wants to give that up, but likely he won't. And like,
Mm-hmm.
he's getting pleasure out of that. And who would give up like being around their kids and grandchildren for some potential dating situation? I
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't, and I think
Yeah.
that's what happened on the Golden Bachelor. Either they hadn't thought it through, or, sometimes they bring those people. I think, what was it? Love is Blind. No, one of those shows where it said that it was set in Seattle, but then a bunch
Mm-hmm.
of them didn't even live in Seattle. Like one lived in Arizona, and it's kind of like,
Oh yeah,
I
yeah.
think it'd
Love
be
is
Queer
blind.
Ultimatum also. Yeah, they bring these people from just totally different parts of the country. I mean, how is that going to work? Are people really going to like up and move from their life because they met somebody
Mm-hmm.
on a reality show? Even if they think they fell in love. Like, it's one thing if you're both in the same town, right?
Right.
You
Yep.
see them, they go to these apartments the mutual apartment, but they go and check out each other's apartments. And some of those people were living like pretty far away. And I thought, my God, like, I mean, I've done it. I moved across country, but now I wouldn't do that anymore. You know, like I've kerplunked myself right into this house with these dogs, you know, they're like, I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it. And we, you know, remember we had Dr. Frankie on and she talked about expanding your pool, especially for lesbians, you know, because you're in a pretty small pool, especially if you're in a smaller town. But honestly, why would I don't want to move. I just thought about moving back to, you know, Seattle for work. And I was like, no, it's just too much I'd rather be bored here, you know? I mean, honestly, like I would choose boredom over uprooting my life. And I'm not talking about having kids and grandkids, right? So, I mean, why would those bachelor people, you know?
Right. Well, I mean, it's any of these things, right? Some people could double down on the moving, you know, across the country for each other. Some people could be double downing on, I've heard of it too, where it's like, you know, like a military spouse, or you were in law enforcement. The spouses are like, can you just retire? Can you get out? I'm scared. It's dangerous. I have an expectation that you're going to live a long and healthy life, and you have an expectation that you're going to be fulfilled in your job. And here we are having very different expectations, but I'm worried every night that you go to work.
Well, that's an interesting thing, right? Like, why would somebody get with somebody in a dangerous job and then want them to be out of it?
Well, maybe they met them and then they went into it though.
Well, they need, they need to not go into it because those kind of jobs are like, your identity, right? So that I would urge people, you know, if something like that freaks you out, or you're worried, like if your partner's in Doctors Without Borders, or your partner's a police officer, or, you know, some kind of, you know, like law enforcement or something like that, then you're going to sit at home and be worried, just don't even go there. Because these are real identities for people, and to give those up for other people, that can be really, you want to talk about them having problems in the relationship. You can have more problems in the relationship if they do that. And I also think people giving up things for other people, like parents do it for kids. They give up, you know, women in particular, right? The vast majority are women who, you know, stop working or whatever to have kids, and then they're really unsatisfied with their lives 10 years later. Not everybody and not all situations, but they lose identity when their kids no longer need them as much.
Right.
Or that their spouse like rejects them because the spouse now is bored of them because they gave up like having like a full life to raise kids, you know?
Well, I mean, any of these things are along the lines of, you know, differing expectations of, you know, I've seen this a lot, even on reality shows, is like, you know, particularly heterosexual ones, is like the man's like, I'm going to provide. And the woman's like, I don't need anyone to provide. And it's even just different ideas of what it should look like. I mean, it's everything from where you live to what you do for a job, to kids, to the thermostat, to, I mean, I even remember with one of my relationships, you know, I really love the companionship part of relationships. That's one of my favorite things. I like want somebody to be my best friend too. And, I was, you know, in a relationship where someone, I would say, you want to go, we need to go to the grocery store. And it was like, well, either you go to the grocery store or I go to the grocery store, but we both don't need to go to the grocery store. It only takes one person to go to the grocery store. And I wanted to go because I thought it was time that we could spend together, and it was companionship. And my goal was to spend time together. And her goal was to pick up groceries and be time efficient. And so then I was in a different relationship, and that person always wanted to go to the store with me, to the point where I would be like, oh, I'm running to the store, and she would drop what she was doing to come with me. And at that point I was like, my goal is companionship, but I also have a little bit underlying goal of a little bit of independence, that's like, we don't always need to go to the grocery store together. And so sometimes, like, be careful what you wish for, because the pendulum swings the other way. And then, so I thought my ultimate like goal was, let's spend all of our time together, because I was with somebody who we'd hardly spent time together. And then all of a sudden I spent every second with this person, and I was like, okay, all right, somewhere I need to, you know, kind of swing it back a little bit. But, you know, so those expectations can change, and it's okay. You could go into a relationship thinking one thing, and then all of a sudden you get it and you're like, oh, that's not really That's not exactly what I
Right.
want now. And then you have to, so you can't have this conversation once. It's not like you do 8 dates and then you're like, all right, we're good. We've done our 8 dates,
Right.
but like the 10th date, if you change your mind, like you can change your mind. Like that's allowed.
Well, you just have to articulate it.
Right. Yeah. You don't want to blindside anybody. Well, so what do you do when your expectations are different? So like, I know for you, you talked about, you were in a situationship once and your
Hmm.
expectations of that I remember were drastically different about
Than the other person's.
than the other
Oh
person.
yeah. I
And,
just whined and cried and made a fit and a fuss all the
and
time until the whole relationship exploded in a fiery burst of me leaving where I was and coming back home
yes,
where
and
I
that,
was
that might
visiting.
actually even be an understatement.
Yeah, well,
Yeah, it
that's the
was,
thing. But that's true.
yeah,
She and I cried and cried that last day, and then I was done. Like,
yeah,
I came home and I was like finished. Like, because I don't want to be in something that's, I don't know, I'm not interested in that. I want the collective, not collective, like we have to agree on every little thing or we have to see the vision for the relationship, but I want to be within a relationship,
mm-hmm,
however that ends up looking, but not, I didn't really like the situationship.
yeah,
Plus there was some like dishonesty going on there. So there were other
yeah,
things happening. But also that situationship did get me to the point where now I can be in a much more removed relationship than I normally am. And I'm okay with that too.
yeah. I mean, it served its purpose, but if your goal was that person being your forever person, that kind of started
Well,
off
I mean, I'm just
tricky.
saying that, but that's how I view every relationship. Why would I date someone if I didn't think that was the possibility? That's how I am. And my best friend's always like, oh my God, do you know what dating means? And this is how normal people, meaning straight people, date. And she's got a very different view and vision of dating than I do. And she's
Mm-hmm,
very proud of me, what I'm doing right now, but it's like foreign to me. You know, I
mm-hmm.
am a U-Haul, move it in right away. I've moved in with people right away, you know,
Yep.
without having these discussions. So I think
Mm-hmm,
these kind of discussions are really important to have
mm-hmm.
before you make any moves whatsoever.
Yep. And then as you continue on, right? Because it's like, again, your expectations could change. And that's okay, but you need to figure out how to be on the same page and talk about that. Um, let's look at something a little bit related to this, but it's this idea of transference. And I'm curious about your ideas on this. So transference. So this happens in relationships when someone might be having been in a very long-term relationship and they've got habits and routines and kind of expectations set about what a partner looks like based on that person who ultimately becomes their ex. They then get into another relationship and then they sort of almost pick up where they left off, almost assuming that the other person knows those habits, those routines, and that they have that sense of familiarity, almost as if they were literally coming from that past relationship. And it
Mm-hmm.
sets the relationship up kind of in an awkward space because you're like almost picking up where you left off, but like with a new actor. Do you remember in Roseanne when they swapped out Becky? It's kind of like that. Like you're the Becky, right? Like all of a sudden there's a new Becky and she's supposed to be exactly like the old Becky. And that creates a really like a dissonance of expectations because you're new and you don't really know this person yet. You sort of feel almost like thrust into this space of familiarity.
Well, I think it's like that whole thing of going from one relationship to another, not so much like Becky. I mean, Becky should have been identical, and that is really freaky. There's several shows where they've done that, where they've subbed out the actor for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm.
It's very hard to get your, it's really hard. They did it in The Fosters too with the oldest, one of the sons.
Oh, with
And it
Jesus.
was,
Yeah.
yeah, oh my God. It was so, I'm like, ugh, I don't like this new Jesus. And then, it was just, it drove me
Mm-hmm.
crazy. But it's more that like, you know, you're in a long-term relationship, you're in a relationship with someone, and then that relationship ends. But that's kind of your relationship paradigm. That's what you think of as a relationship. And then you go and you get with somebody new and they're not like that other person or they don't want the same thing. I think that's really hard. And again, it's just a matter of communicating. But I think people can get real like attached to how their relationship was if they were happy in the previous one, you know?
Mm-hmm. And even if it was ended up being a toxic or bad relationship or ended poorly or whatever, there's still things that people like about their relationships, at least from when they got together, and that feel safe, right? That feel safe and familiar. I mean, I'll tell you one of the ones that's really basic, but happens a lot is some people have a tendency to want to sleep on a certain side of the bed. So in every relationship I've ever been in, I've always slept on the exact same side of the bed. And it's like if I had, like it's like a first sleepover with someone, it's like, oh, what side of the bed do you want to be on? I say, what side do you want to be on? But I want to be on this side. And it's because it's safe and familiar.
So weird.
It's just safe and familiar. And so while it's not necessarily taking
I've
from the
never
relationship,
considered that in my life.
Oh, I mean, but those basic, that's like I said, the most basic thing, and it has no real like emotional connection, but it feels familiar and it feels safe and I can sleep the way that I'm used to.
But is that about the relationship? What if you were just going with a friend to a hotel as you're wont to do? You do that. I mean, do you feel like if you shared a bed with a friend that you need to be on that particular side?
The only time I have shared a bed with a friend in the last decade was when you took the other bed at the hotel and, had me sleep next to our third person on our trip. And I will tell you, I'm almost positive that I slept on my side of the bed that night, just so you know. But I mean, that's like one little thing, right? Like where you just pick up habits and routines and you sort of assume the other person's going to be on the other side. And I've never run into anyone who either cared enough or slept on my side and really wanted it. We've never gone to task about it. But if I was with somebody that felt as strongly as I do, like, what are we going to do? Rock, paper, scissors for it? I mean,
what do you do?
I don't know. And I mean, that's just a really, like I said, a really surface level one is the side of the bed. But what do you do when the expectation is?
Oh, interesting. I would just be like, okay, get on the other side.
But it could be something, like for you, it might be like, you do stand up and stuff and you would really like, maybe you were dating someone who went to all your stand up shows and you loved having them in the front row and then you could go sit with them during the breaks and all this stuff. And then you started dating someone who was like, I'm not a big fan of stand up. Just go. It's kind of like you going to work every day. Just let me know when you get home. And you're kind of like, wait a minute, hold on. My other person used to come to all my shows. So it's like, it could be something even like that.
Well, those are, expectations of how a relationship should be. Yeah. I've really gotten a real slap down about that. And I've also been very rejecting of somebody else where I'm like, I don't want what you had with that other person. And I've really I've caused some rift and caused some hurt feelings by being like hardcore about this is what I want, and then getting what I said I wanted and then being butthurt because I felt rejected, It's very interesting. And I think it really depends on the two individuals and how capable you are of discussing things. And I think, not being hot-headed is like the number one rule that you should have going into a relationship. Like being more measured and talking things out and really being able to see like the bigger picture and see down the road, because I haven't done that. I've like been very reactionary. And it's really hard to walk that back once you've done that, which I have been. I've been the reactionary one,
And it's not productive. And,
No, it's not. It happens at the time. It feels like, justifiable to be reactionary, but it really is, as we see in society at large right now, it's not a good trait.
Well, I was listening to that podcast this morning I was telling you about, and the guy on the podcast said something also about this idea of like triggers. So sometimes you bring the good habits with you that you expect in a relationship, and then sometimes you bring the bad ones, right? The things that you don't want to have happen, and you would expect that they are not going to happen in this relationship because they were so hurtful in my past one, and then they do, right? You're triggered. And now all of a sudden it's like all this emotional baggage comes up. And he was saying something really interesting about, like if you have some kind of a conflict or a disagreement over something that one person needs to take space, that, they tell the other person, like, I need this amount of time to think about it. And so we've talked about that on the show before. But the other part that I thought was really cool that I hadn't heard is that they talk about whenever you have some kind of disagreement around, an expectation or anything really, that you preface before you split off and do your own thinking and your own independence with some type of a reassurance statement. I know this is difficult for us. I know we're not in agreement right now. I love you and I'm not going to leave you.
Mm-hmm.
And it puts the parties, not only does it like kind of give that reassurance, but it puts them both at ease that you will work this out. You just need some time, not if you work it out, but you will work it out. And I thought that reassurance statement was just really powerful.
Well, it's similar to that, like, oh, we're going to take, you pre-agree on like a break, what do you call it? Like if we're getting into an argument, we'll revisit this later. And the people agree that they'll take that space, which I never was good at, but
yeah,
I just was in a little kind of conflict right before this podcast recording that I had to work out in that way and like have this whole discussion that just because like one of us, being me, had feelings about something and we disagreed about something, it doesn't mean it's catastrophic or that, it's a terrible thing, and that conflict doesn't always have to be bad, right? But that it's not easy. Having relations with another person isn't easy.
No, it's not.
Because this person called up joking about something, and then when I then invited them to do something, I thought they were a little bit not so friendly about it. And we had to have a whole discussion about that. And then what was our expectation? And then the conversation just got very reactionary. Well, then, don't invite me anywhere, that kind of thing. And I'm like, well, I don't want it to be like that, right? It's just that I felt hurt by the way that, something was said, but it wasn't, it was also about a bigger issue, and what do either of us want, like in our daily life,
Well, and that's key. It's like it's almost always about a bigger issue, right? It's almost always about that. It's, like going to the grocery store together or doing the thermostat. There's always something under there. It's like, those were both issues of independence and agency to make choices for yourself and feeling disrespected or feeling like, not having a say in those things. And so like part of it is, resolving the disagreement of the expectations right when it happens, but also, it's okay to say, okay, we figured that part out, right? The technical part, but what's underneath it? Because it's going to come out in a different way. It might come out in a totally unique thing that you never even imagined, but it's the same exact issue and it will keep resurfacing. And until you say, okay, what is beneath this? Why does going to the grocery store with me matter so much to you? And it's, because I feel like you work a lot and I don't ever get to see you. And this is like our one time where we don't have technology and we get to talk to each other. And it's like, oh, I get it. You feeling like you want more quality time together. And then all of a sudden it's more about that than it is about really anything about the grocery store. And so sometimes
that requires people to be articulate and understand
and
what they really want.
Yeah. Being very self-aware, right?
Self-aware. Right.
You have to be able to do that, but you can always just ask yourself the prompt of like, what is underneath this? What is bothering me the most about this situation? Right. Or what does this mean? And if you just ask yourself those prompts and you sit with it for a minute, you probably could figure this out. Like, why does it matter which side of the bed I sleep on? I mean, I really have to think about that. Why does it matter? Well,
if somebody was wanting the same side, you both would have to think about why it mattered to you.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you?
Yeah, exactly.
Sometimes I sleep the opposite. I mean, I sleep across the end of the bed the other way, like not the way people normally lay with their head at the head of the bed. Like I literally will sleep sideways. I slept sideways with one dog the other night at the foot of the bed. I mean, it's really like how, you know what I mean?
It depends on what's important. I know that like my mom, she would sleep on whichever side of the bed was closest to the bathroom because she would get up in the middle of the night and go several times and she really didn't want to bother her partner. So for her, that was what was most important, is being respectful of him sleeping. Right.
Well, that's like practical, right?
Yeah, but it's a practical reason. But, did that come from the fact that she used to wake somebody up and they got mad at her? I mean, I never explored
But
that
what
with her.
about people who are in long-term relationships and they no longer share a bedroom, you know?
Yeah.
Like because they want their own space or whatever. Like
And as long as
that's
they're both
quite
in agreement,
interesting.
right? Yeah. The expectation. I mean,
Again, it's just a matter of the two people coming together and deciding what they want. But that was interesting that the podcast I listened to about the polyamorous family and the judgment of regular society on what they were doing when they were perfectly happy and it was working for them is like each person, each group of people has to just figure out what that works for them,
yeah.
and we have this like narrative of the nuclear family, right? That's been kind of perpetuated since the 40s and 50s. And that, that's actually contributed a lot to loneliness because, people left their extended family or didn't live in multi-generational houses anymore. And then, like, what if people take a different way of being in a relationship? You know what I mean? Like, people look at them funny, right? Like,
Right.
oh,
Well,
you're not living together, or you don't want to live together, or you don't
mm-mm.
want to have this, or you want to have your own bedroom, but you're married, you know? I
Yeah. So
had
like
a
those
friend
bigger
who's married.
expectations. Yeah.
Yeah, like I have a friend who was married for 30 something years, and she told me in confidence and quietly, like that they weren't in the same bedroom. I'm like, so? Like,
Mm-hmm.
it seemed a matter of like shame for her. You know what I mean? Like that
Mm-hmm.
other people would be judging. And my grandparents slept in the same bed for, I don't know, 70 years, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, it's weird, but it's what you want. You know what I mean?
I mean, as long as the people who are in the relationship, consent and that they meet their expectations together, then that's what matters. But there is a societal lens on that. You're right. There's all of that just the baggage
There's
that's
a lot
around
of
it.
pressure about how
Yep.
things should be.
Well, and that can influence one person to change their expectations. Come home and be like, wait a minute. I was okay with us not sleeping in the same bed, but now I kind of want us to sleep in the same bed because everybody else is sleeping in the same bed. And so you do have to, those aren't like, you can't, it's hard to just discount them and say, well, they don't matter as long as the people involved, consent. But really in real life, like it does come down to those people and with their expectations in alignment. But if their expectations aren't in alignment, then it's tricky. It becomes real tricky,
Mm-hmm. Right.
and
Again, get to seek the help of a licensed professional or an unlicensed one.
just somebody who can help you. And I mean, that's the thing is, talking about this at the beginning of a relationship. What are your expectations? How do you see relationships? What are the most important values? What are the vision and goals of this relationship in your mind? Are we picking up?
And as the relationship goes on, because a lot of that changes.
Yeah,
and being
exactly.
okay with that and not threatened by it.
Yeah. It might be like, yeah, I want to go grocery shopping with you all the time. And then after a while, it's like, okay, really, I'm just running and picking up bananas, like on the way home from work. I don't need to come home and get you and go get bananas. Like you start to realize that things change. So it's like it's conversation at the beginning, and then it's a conversation as you age through the relationship. I mean, people have been together like 50 years. Those goals change. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Those goals change a lot over time, but being able to talk about it is really, really important. And then if they're different, that's where we talk about compromise or the third solution, or just being okay with things being different. You have different expectations,
Yeah.
and talking about those. So what is your biggest takeaway from our conversation today? Because I've actually had a lot of insight from my own life, like just even talking through this, like what is a takeaway for you that you think would maybe be helpful for you today or moving forward?
Well, again, it's just like letting your expectations be known. At the beginning of our podcast, I wrote out a poem about the conflict that I just had with that person prior to getting on this thing, and then texted it to her, like basically setting up my expectations about us being able to support each other. So even though we had an argument about feelings and what do I want or what does she want and what does she see, like, how we manage this particular issue of going out with friends and whatever. Like my point was that, like I'm here to work on this stuff. I'm here to, and she had mentioned being overwhelmed earlier about just every like life, right? And so I just wanted to put that out there. I guess it's what I wrote is my expectation that what I want is for us to be able to be a support and help each other,
Mm-hmm.
And so she already texted during the podcast, said beautiful, thank you. And she's coming over later. But, had I not done that and had I not put out the expectation, we'd probably still be locked in some conflict,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So really it's communicating. It's communicating, saying what you need and what you want and what you're willing to do,
Mm-hmm. I mean, do you think that poem will elicit some kind of conversation later where you talk about what does support look like for each of us? Or do you think that this was sort of the entryway into at least acknowledging that it's important to you?
I don't know. At some point, I think my point was made clear.
Okay.
I mean, it wasn't like a poem that things were hidden in it. Like it was, it's like very, very black and white. Like, it's like, I want us, if you're overwhelmed, I'm here to be a support to you. I want us to, help each other in our lives together. So I don't know that there needs to be more discussion. I think we've had that discussion before, and a lot of people are learning to do this now, to say, what do I need? What do you need from me? Rather than, because a lot of people vent or they have issues going on, and some people are learning to say, okay, what do you need from me? Right? Do you need me to listen? Do you need me whatever? But we have to do that in the general context of the relationship. What do you need from me? Do you need me to leave you alone? Do you need me to, try and incorporate you into my life? Do you need me to, be there? All that stuff. So I think, again, it's just setting up, it's just communicating,
Yeah, because I know some
Did
of
you
it
learn anything from this conversation?
Well, as you're saying that, I'm thinking about this idea that we have silent expectations, right? Where people fail to meet our expectations, yet we never articulated them. You should have known that I wanted you to go to the grocery store.
Right.
And that is,
or you should have known that I want to have a lifelong relationship, or you should know that that's not what I was interested in. And I think, what a lot of conflict that people have is because they didn't articulate. The other person doesn't really know. That other person wants what they want. That's different from people being disingenuous, right?
Right.
And not being truthful.
Right. Different expectations and articulating them and working through it is really different than having these hidden or silent expectations that you don't articulate, because either you assume the other person knows. That's part of transference. Like, wait a minute, that because, oh wait, you're not the same person. You're a different Becky. Or that you have these silent expectations because you just assume you're both on the same page and you realize that you're not. And I think that's important. So the idea of articulating what you need is really, really important. I think having these as ongoing conversations is incredibly important. And I think maybe even throwing that question in there about not just, what do you want, what do you need, or what are your expectations, but have your expectations about anything in our relationship changed over time? Are there things that are different,
Well, maybe there's conflict coming up or problems, and that's how you can ask that. Like, is there some need that you're having that's not being met, or have your expectations changed about what you want out of this relationship, or are you changing? I mean, I just heard this, people getting divorced after 40 years the other day. It was, on my work thing. And I was like, my God, you'd think if you'd made it 40 years, you'd have it made.
Right.
Apparently one of them wasn't happy for like 20 years.
Wow.
It's like, God, would someone really just be unhappy for 20 years?
Yeah.
Or were they really not unhappy? They're just saying that now. But you'd think 40 years that you would be together for the rest of your life.
Like, yeah, it's a sunk cost. Let's just do it. Let's just stick with it.
But I don't even mean that way. I mean that you've been through a lot in 40 years,
Yeah.
And then each other, and I mean, I need to get with these people and tell them what's out there on the dating apps, to scare them back into the thing. But maybe it was horrible for them. I don't know. But to me, that would be my expectation. Gosh, we've made it I've never made it longer than 8 years with anybody, right? So I would think 40 years, holy cow, I would
Right.
never leave that person. What if I got to 40 years with someone? That would mean I was really into the relationship.
For you, yeah. And some people just hold on because they do
Yeah.
it for the kids, and then they do it for the grandkids, and then they
I
realize
can't even do something for
I'm
2 days or 2 hours. It's something I don't want to do. I mean, I've
know.
left jobs. I've been, you know what I mean?
Yeah. But I mean, a lot of people do, and they stick with it, and then they realize over time they've changed. They, become more extroverted, and they want to go out and be social all the time, but their spouses like become more introverted over time, and like they never want to do anything. And it's like, this isn't the life that I want to live. And so people can simultaneously change. It isn't just one partner, and they can move totally away from each other. I've seen that happen with like religion, where, two people who aren't very religious, one of them finds some types of religion and they go totally different direction, or politics. And we've talked about that before, but this idea that people grow away and apart. And so you're kind of lucky in a way if you grow in a way that your expectations stay aligned. I mean, that's tough because we change, we're dynamic. And so my expectations about a lot of things have changed over time, like my expectations of when and where I work has changed over time. My expectations of what I'm willing to do on weekends. Like now I don't say yes to everything on a Saturday night because I'm tired. And so my expectations have changed because I'm a dynamic individual. And to think that I'm going to be able to be partnered with someone who also changes in the same direction as me for everything along the way is tough, right? And some of them you can negotiate and you could just say, we've changed or we're different. We have a little bit different expectations and we can live with it. And others, you might just say, this isn't how I'm going to finish the last 10, 20 years of my life with you. I can't do it.
Crazy. Well, just don't be like that lady in Oregon who killed her husband after 25 years because she wanted to move to Portugal.
Oh my gosh.
25 happy years, according to everybody who knew them. So
well, even if you're unhappy, just say I'm going to move to Portugal.
Don't murder. Just don't murder.
So
figure your own shit out and
that's the
get
big
your job. That's the final takeaway. Get your own job, get your own money, or go live as a beach bum. I don't care. You don't have the right to kill somebody else.
Yeah.
Because you're unhappy, because you didn't articulate, whatever.
Yep. One of my partners and I, we had said at one point, like, we're like, all right, if we ever don't want to be together, do not hit me over the head with a frying pan and throw me in a lake off of a canoe. Like, just don't.
Yeah.
Just tell me you're unhappy. We'll try to work through it. If we can't, we'll split up. But, and so it was always like an ongoing joke, like, do not throw me in the lake.
That's a joke with a lot of people. In fact, that was a joke with these two people. And then she did it.
Oh my gosh.
So she's going to be in prison until she's 96. No, yeah.
That's the thing is it isn't a joke. I mean, it's like literally there are people out there that do this. And so, the idea though is if you communicate and you talk in your right mind and, then perhaps you can avoid situations that are very, very drastic.
Well, and there's the other takeaway is that people should try as much as they can to remain interdependent. So they each have their own money. They each have their own way to, if they want to move to Portugal, they want to do something, they can go out and do that for themselves. They can say, you know what, I love you. This has been a great relationship. Or, hey, let me just go to Portugal for a year. You stay here and you do your thing and I'll come back, or we'll talk about it in a year, see if we miss each other. Like, why not have those options? Just have those options, people. Don't kill each other.
Okay.
Don't go killing your spouse. It's not nice.
No, just communicate and go to therapy, as Tracy would say, but don't kill somebody.
Don't kill. There's no reason.
No reason. Okay. That seems to be like a really good kind of mic drop ending. I'm not sure how we can top that advice off. But anyways, it's been another interesting conversation. I always have to process my process with you because it's always so fascinating, right? What we talk about. And, so anyways, I'm really glad we had a chance to connect about this particular topic. So thanks for joining in, and for all of our listeners out there. Until our next episode, go out there and rock those relationships. If you liked what you heard, check out our show notes for resources from today's episode. Make sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram under Rock That Relationship, and go to our website at rockthatrelationship.com for updated episodes and more great information.
Thanks for listening. Now go rock those relationships.